drives that ball. It's belted left field, going back two-run shot, and that was a no-doubter off the bat.
What's up, Dutchmen fans? I'm Joey Palatsky. Today, I'm joined by a familiar face here, and Adam Zebrowski from the 2021 squad. Also, recently drafted to the Atlanta Braves. Did the majority of his summer with the Dutchmen. Spent some time with the Braves this past summer as well. Adam, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Joey. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Adam, I want to start with let's start with your Dutchman season here. Obviously, you were there for about the front half of the season. I mean, you really hit really well out at St. John Fisher, won D3 Player of the Year, and then you just kept mashing into the summer. I mean, what really went well for you at the plate this summer in Albany?
I think it was early in the Fisher season. I went through some struggles and was able to find some things that worked for me, and it was a lot of mental stuff. It wasn't even necessarily my mechanics. And once I kind of got in a rhythm and confidence grew, and I kind of just stuck on a roll. And even when I'd have a bad game, I'd think back to kind of what I was thinking during those games when I was hitting well, and just try and replicate that each game after a bad game.
Yeah, I also want to touch on obviously you had plenty of success in Albany, but I really want to talk about your draft process and now being with the Braves. Let's focus on that a little bit here. There was a point in the summer you got drafted midsummer while you were in the middle of your Dutchman campaign. Just talk about how, I know there was a little while there you were in the transfer portal. You were talking with teams, you were also playing summer baseball. Just talk about how that whole process was for you over those few weeks.
It was probably one of the more stressful months, I would say, that whole time. Because as much as I love everybody at Fisher, I thought it was time to kind of possibly look forward and take the next step heading into that senior year, whether that was the draft or transferring. So I had actually committed and signed with St. Mary's, but right after entering the portal, there was tons. It was just a lot of schools that I was in touch with, and they had recruiting coordinators coming to watch me play in Albany, and there was also professional scouts coming to watch me play. So it was trying to handle, both of those were tough, but, having my family, my mom, my dad, my brother, just kind of helping me, talking me through it. And ultimately when it came down to it and I got drafted and still had an offer on the table and was signed with St. Mary's, it was, every kid's childhood dream is when you start playing this game is to get drafted, play professional baseball. But when you have the chance to get your education paid for and possibly even improve your stock, there was a lot of thought that went into it, a lot more than I think people even realize. And my mom and dad really helped talk me through it. And I think I'm happy with the decision I made.
Yeah, you said obviously there's plenty of pros to both sides, whether you decide to go to St. Mary's or whether you decide to take that Braves offer. Ultimately, I mean, what are some of the? I'm sure there were plenty of pros and cons to it, but I mean, what were some of the key ones that you looked at that made you end up signing that contract?
I would say the biggest pro for signing the contract and taking the chance to play professional baseball was ultimately that this has been my dream since I first picked up the bat, and the possibility of going to school to try and improve my stock and then get injured or something happens where you don't then get drafted. I thought I would regret that for forever, but that's not to say I'm looking down on St. Mary's or even St. John Fisher. It was just, I thought right now that was the best thing for me was to take that. But there were a lot of pros to St. Mary's as well. It would have been, education paid for senior year and into grad school if it had come to that. But it ultimately just came down to, like, I'm a Braves fan, got drafted by my favorite team. I thought it was God telling me that this is the route I should go.
Yeah, you mentioned just a couple minutes ago there that it was one of the most stressful weeks of your life. That's another part I want to touch on here. I mean, what were you doing, whether it be on the field, off the field? I mean, how are you kind of managing that stress? I feel like it's a very underrated aspect, especially with college people and having to deal with it. What were some of the things you were doing either on the field or off the field to kind of get through that time?
I sometimes do struggle dealing with that stress. So that even made it a little bit worse, but it was just I constantly was thinking and processing thoughts in my head, but ultimately it was just being open with my family and like talking with them. And I think sometimes that's the biggest thing, is getting an outside perspective. Not everybody, nobody's living in your shoes. You know, you have to make the decisions you think are best for you, but sometimes an outside perspective can give you a different view of where you're at and make you think about and see things that you didn't realize before.
Yeah, you mentioned trying to get the outside perspective, but I'm sure you had so many people in your ear, just during that process.
Mhm.
How were you kind of just trying to manage, whose opinions really matter to you? I mean, I know you mentioned your family, but I don't know if you had a few friends that were talking to you as well, but, I'm sure you had so many people hitting you up thinking, they have your best interest in mind. How did you kind of manage, okay, this is who I want to listen to. And, this is a nice person and, I care about them, but, I don't want to really weigh their opinion as much in my future.
Ultimately, it just came down to who I trusted the most. An old summer coach of mine, Kevin Rogers, as well as Coach Davey. Those two were unbelievable helps through the process the entire month, whether that be reaching out to professional teams or schools that were coming and coordinating that too, when I would play, when I could DH or when I could catch. And I think, my mom and dad, and not having gone through any of this, and even the first time through with the recruiting process, being a D3 kid, like I didn't have a ton of schools on me. I only think I had three, it was two D3s and a D2 on me. So it was like basically a whole new process with the recruiting process alone, being a lot of D1s, and then having professional interests as well kind of flooded me. But I think it ultimately came down to the people that I trusted the most, and I truthfully believed had my best interests at heart.
Yeah, I'm 100%. I wanna touch on your ever since you've been drafted and what you've been up to since then. But I was thinking about getting into that next question there, but you just touched on something that I want to talk about here. You said you had two D3 offers and one D2 offer out of high school, and now obviously being drafted with the Braves. I mean, what really went into it, whether it be mentally or physically? How did you get from that point coming out of high school to having three offers, none of which are D1, and now you find yourself in the Atlanta Braves organization?
I truthfully believe everything happens for a reason. And I think the two things that were a blessing in disguise were COVID and me injuring my knee freshman year. And that one especially because that summer after I had the surgery and had to sit out for 2 to 3 months, I'd put on some weight because I wasn't able to move much. And my nutrition wasn't great. And I didn't know much about lifting either. So I think after that, I really started to find a passion for lifting and nutritional interests and different things like that helped me to kind of put on the right weight, lose some bad weight that I had on me. And ultimately during COVID, having a cage and a gym was incredible for me because it just allowed me to, I think, take leaps and bounds ahead of other people that, to no fault of their own, might not have had those resources with them. So I credit a lot of my success and my growth and development to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of your story and how far you've come since coming out of high school. And even though I've only really been able to follow it since, last March, whatever it may have been, but, there's plenty of people now that are going to be tuning into your story from just the MLB chapter and on. And let's talk about that aspect of it now. Obviously, I mean, let's just take it back, honestly, to the day you got drafted. Just that moment, it comes up. I'm sure you saw it either on the draft tracker or, they don't cover those rounds on TV. But what was that moment like when you found out you were drafted? I mean, not even just by the Atlanta Braves, but your childhood favorite team.
Mm-hmm. I still get chills this day thinking about it. And it was the most surreal moment of my life. It's, you see your name pop up and because I was following the draft tracker and my family was home with me. And I don't know if they believed it, but like it's an indescribable feeling because it's like everything you've worked for, everything you've aspired to become just came true. And now you're taking that next step. You're playing at quote unquote the highest level. Obviously, you have levels up there, but it's you're getting paid to play a kid's game, and it's like it still doesn't even sink in all that well with me, all that much, I should say, with me.
Yeah, so let's talk about obviously, I mean, I'm sure it was such a great moment for you. And like you said, you get chills thinking about it. But let's talk about since you left Albany and being drafted, and now you spent your first summer in the Atlanta Braves organization. First, let's talk about what went well. And then after that, I mean, just talk about what those kind of adjustments were to the pro lifestyle.
Yeah, I think what went well was right away. I got involved, and I had never really caught guys in the upper 90s and into the hundreds. And we kind of, in the mini camp, we were catching bullpens, and a few guys could get up there. And the way I was able to handle that kind of made me settle down and become more confident. But there was a lot of adjustments in terms of not only the physical aspect of the game, like obviously, most of your guys are going to be sitting mid 90s and have sharp stuff, but it was also the mental aspect of our one hitting coach in Augusta, he talks a lot about gratitude and just being grateful that you're able to play this game, and being happy and not stressing on every little thing that goes right or wrong. Look at the broader aspect of just being happy that you're getting paid to play a game, and you can look at that with more confidence. So I think that's what I'm continuing to grow on, but found a lot of progress too towards the end of the season. Even the short time I was there, is my mental approach to the game is growing a lot.
Yeah, no, you can definitely tell. Obviously, that's such a big part of it is just appreciating where you're at, and I know you really don't take that lightly. One part I had for you here, obviously, with like you mentioned, you see guys throwing in the high 90s and into the hundreds, and they have sharp stuff. I mean, what was more of an adjustment for you? Was it catching guys that are getting into the hundreds or hitting it? I mean, what did you think would be tougher, and what ended up being tougher?
I had imagined it would be hitting it, and it was too, especially, just like, I think catching it hard to explain, but I have a more natural feel catching it, and then, hitting, it wasn't as difficult as I thought. It's obviously it's the hardest thing to do in sports, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as crazy of an adjustment as I thought. It's just, hitting is 90% timing. So it's just adjusting to different cues of when he separates, that's when you lift, like different things like that are just things I had to kind of adjust to and become acclimated with.
Yeah, obviously, you had such a great season at St. John Fisher. You had such a great season with the Dutchmen over the summer as well. And one of the things that stood out to me watching you with the Dutchmen was your timing and how on time you seem to be, and how you can work really center field, pull side, whatever it may be. Did you think that really helped you when you got into the pro level? And like you said, one of the major adjustments is timing. Do you think with how much timing is a strength of yours? Do you think that helped you a little bit?
I absolutely do. I think, understanding where I was at Fisher, and then you move into a little bit higher velocity in the PGCBL with Dutchmen. And I think even that kind of bridged the gap. Whereas if I went from D3 right to professional baseball, I think it would have been a lot different. But being able to bridge the gap and see some guys that can get into the 90s with good stuff from, high D1s that'll probably be draft picks in the coming years, I think that kind of helped me to understand where I needed to get to before already having to see those guys. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I think just trying to understand that, and I love learning new things. So I think too, learning different cues and different ways to time guys up better was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you. With the competition level in the PGCBL is so huge, especially like you said, you see so many D1 arms. But Adam, another thing I want to touch on here. Obviously, you had a pretty solid season, this past summer in the Atlanta Braves organization. I know a lot of the future is kind of dependent on what the Braves decide to do with you. But in this present moment and right now, I mean, what are you up to? We're recording this mid-January. I mean, what are things looking like in your life? I mean, even looking ahead to next season, I mean, what's going on down there?
Just training a lot. I'm in there every day, getting work in, and luckily seeing some friends. As I saw some that had come back home for the winter. I was in Florida for about a month and a half, towards the end of 2021, and then I'll be heading back down there in about 3 or 4 days to kind of get a month head start on spring training and be around more guys catching bullpens. Being in that warm weather, so I'm outside, able to long toss and get more, space outside, obviously. But it's been good to kind of settle down a little bit after a hectic kind of summer and spring, and just kind of be around my family.
Yeah, no, obviously I'm sure it sounds nice. And Adam, I appreciate all your time here today. And I'm sure we'll talk going forward. Obviously one of the Dutchmen in the pros now. You definitely will be a familiar face to all the Dutchmen fans. But Adam, I appreciate the time, and thanks for coming on these this Dutchman offseason interview today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Joey.